Thank you everybody for being here. My name is Ajit Sahi. I'm the moderator for the evening. Thank you, Ms. Moitra, Member of Parliament for being here. Thank you, Siddharth Varadarajan for being here. This is a great gathering here. Thank you all for coming here in this cold winter. I'm coming from Washington DC. It's not so cold there. It's much colder here. Let me start with you, Ms. Moitra, because time is of the essence here. We have a hard stop at 7:15. You've given two very important speeches in Parliament. One was last week, and the other was shortly after the elections results were announced and the government won the election. And in both your speeches, there's plenty of material to come back to you on this. But in both speeches, on both occasions, you referenced Germany of the 1930s. This time you've spoken about the Auschwitz, and you spoke the last time also about what was happening at that time in that country. You said, if I recall from that speech, there's a powerful and continuing nationalism being seared into our national fabric. It is superficial, it is xenophobic, and it is narrow. This was your first speech 6-7 months ago. I would like to ask you more about how do you mean superficial? What do you mean by superficial? Xenophobia one can understand, narrow of course one can see, but superficial is something that really caught my eye.
First, hello everyone, and it's wonderful to see a full packed house here, and thank you again for inviting me. There are two things that I would like to set up front. One is that this is a closed door event from what I understand, so I hope there's no immediate telecast of this on any channel or anything. That's the best. And the second is that in India, I am a member of the opposition. I speak in Parliament, I fight in the streets, I stand against the government in elections, but on foreign soil, it is my government. So I will not make personal attacks against anyone, and I would urge everyone in the audience not to agree on to make personal attacks or to make anything like that. That's not something I would like to go down. So with that caveat, let me start. When we say superficial, to me, patriotism is something that is, I think, in all of us. And the reason we're sitting here today is because we love our country and Siddharth as I do. But to be a patriot is also to have the freedom to criticize. And I think what's happening now in India, especially over the last 5 years, is that it is, a lot of people have seen it in the US with Bush, either you're with us or against us. And this is something that is a global thing for the last 5 to 7 years. And in India too, it's if you criticize, it's sort of the extreme form of either you're with us or against us. So patriotism is being defined as if you don't do X, there's a test of everything. So if you speak out, you're not a patriot. There is no freedom to criticize a lot of things. And I think that kind of homogeneity is not something that we were used to as Indians. It's certainly not an India that we grew up in. So that's what I feel when I say superficial, because it's like if you're saying you're going to be a good Hindu, you can lie, you can cheat, but if you go and bathe in the Ganges and you do puja once a day and you think you're a good Hindu, then to me that's being superficial. So similarly, I think if you're being patriotic where you're doing everything that's anti-constitutional, but if you say that you hate Pakistan, and that's all it takes to be nationalist, then I think that's being superficial. So I think that we have to be careful to define patriotism and to define love for our country and nationalism as something which is much broader than sort of a 5-tick test.
It's interesting that you talk about dissent and the response to dissent. We've seen just very recently, in fact yesterday the news came out that a doctor from Gorakhpur who has in the last 2 years become quite a bit of a social activist, he was arrested for speaking out against the Citizenship Amendment Act, and then he was given bail 3 days ago, and we just discovered a few hours ago actually that he has now been detained under NSA for criticizing the Citizenship Amendment Act. Would that qualify as a superficial understanding of dissent?
No, that's not exactly what I meant by superficial understanding of dissent, frankly. That's not what I meant by superficial understanding of nationalism. It was something a little deeper than that. These are cases everywhere, not just here, but in the US and, all over the world. We do see cases like this where people speak up and there's some kind of act or the other that is shown in. This is not new to anyone. So I won't use this one example. I haven't heard of it because I've been traveling, but I won't use this one example to point out that yes, that's superficial. When I said superficial, I meant the superficial idea of nationalism or hyper-nationalism is what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Siddharth, the next question comes to you. Continuing with this trend that we're talking about, What do you think is happening in terms of dissent? I mean, the publication that you were has been in the forefront of speaking the truth to power and writing reports and investigating, which a lot of the criticism has come the way of the Indian media that they have not. In fact, her own speech in Parliament spoke about how the media is now belongs to just one organization, one business house. How do you summarize the situation in India today, especially in the context of the protests that have gone on for the last 2 months?
So I think there's no doubt that a major section of the media has surrendered its role of being what is conventionally known as the fourth pillar or watchdog. They don't believe in subjecting authority or government to critical examination, right? Which is the basic minimum that you expect of independent media in a democracy. And this section of the media sees its role rather as one of amplifying government policy and government prejudice, targeting the government's enemies and the government's opponents as if these are national enemies and traitors. And that's the role that they have arrogated to themselves, I would say largely on a voluntary basis, because nobody can compel them to do this. There is a problem with dissent, and there is a problem of free speech in India, but the media is, I would say, a relatively privileged sector, because despite all the pressures that we face, for example, in the YSA, right, which take multiple forms, financial pressure, defamation, legal suits of one kind or the other, but we are still able to say and write what we want, and we are in a position to put up a hell of a fight if an attempt is made to silence us. But increasingly, whether it's on campuses, whether it's in cities and mohallas and kasbas where people try to exercise their democratic rights as citizens, that right to protest is getting, is being violated. In Uttar Pradesh, it takes great courage and bravery for the women who have gathered outside the clock tower, for example, to do so and protest against the CAA when the manner in which the initial burst of dissent against the CAA was treated, right, in the middle of December, right? The arrest of S.A. Darapuri or the arrest of Siddharth Jaffer, simply for video recording of what was happening, and frivolous cases being filed against them. In Gujarat, it's virtually impossible. You have it now emerges that there's been continuous Section 144 for the past 18 years, banning public protests. And even in states ruled by the opposition, like Maharashtra, for example, the natural instinct of the police is to look at any protest with great suspicion.
In Telangana, Hyderabad police have denied permission for protests.
Exactly. So under the law of the land, you're meant to inform the police. You don't really require permission to protest. And so this is a problem. Campuses meetings aren't held. I've spoken after the dilution of Article 370. I've spoken on the Kashmir topic in many campuses, and very few of them are able to actually use the words Kashmir and 370 in the title of the seminar. And when I went to one seminar at a college in BU which said, the title was, what's the future of federalism in India? And I said, this is a very vague topic. And I don't know, why are you calling me for this vague topic? And they said, well, actually, and this is within a week of 370 being, diluted. And they said, well, actually the topic is on Kashmir, but we can't say it in the headline because then we won't get permission. And even if we get permission, the ABVP will disrupt and the police will say, so cancel them. Right? So this is the sense in which we believe the right to dissent and free speech is under challenge. And of course, media that self-censors and simply chooses not to say things that they have the right to say.
You want to add something?
Yeah, just to add to what you were saying, and increasingly we've seen is for example, with 144 and with just having to inform police. Very often what's happened, and this is something unfortunately that's been a tradition in India, it happened under the emergency as well. So this is not something that's new to, and the current dispensation keeps throwing that back at us, saying that, how are we the West? This has already happened in the late 70s, so that sort of, somebody else did it, so we have the right to do it as well, is what is coming up every day is some kind of, allows them to get away with it. But if you see the role of the courts, for example, the Delhi High Court came down on the police for the Bhim Army chief for Delhi, and he says he doesn't need to, he can go and protest in the Jama Masjid, doesn't make him a Pakistani, there's nothing wrong with it. He just needs to tell them that the police do not have the power to stop it. And Section 144 is not a tool in the hands of the government or a tool in the hands of the police to completely stop peaceful protest by civilians. And while both the Supreme Court and the High Court have made this, it doesn't seem to have changed very much, unfortunately.
Though we did see last month the Supreme Court Chief Justice say that the protests end first before we take up those cases. That has not gone down well with sections of the protesters. I want to come back. You talked about the protests in Lucknow. Shaheen Bagh has become sort of an international icon now. We have stories about it here in the United States. I meet with members of Congress and their staffs in Washington, D.C. They know about Shaheen Bagh. That's the most interesting thing. You said in your speech earlier, in Parliament, you talked about that it has been targeted with the NRC and the Citizenship Amendment Bill. We are making sure that it is only one community that is the target of the anti-immigration laws. Now we see that community has, to the surprise of many people, I guess even to the surprise of the government of the day, has come out in such large numbers and is protesting, perhaps for the first time, with such defiance or with such confidence in 70 years. How do you see this process? What is your view?
I think the thing with the NRC and with the CAA is when I came out with my first speech, the NRC numbers weren't fully out. But when you see what's happened in Assam, out of 19 lakh people, there are 12 lakh Hindus in the list, right? There are 12 lakh Hindus in the list. There are lakh Gurkhas in the list. So it's not as though there are only Muslims in the list. So the constituency I represent and the state I come and the district I come from, Nadia, there are about 55 lakh people, of which 25 lakh are displaced Hindus from Bangladesh who've come over, and a lot of them have come over after 24th March 71, because if that was the cut-off date for the Bangladesh war in Assam, most displaced refugees come after that, and their children are married and they come later, and one brother comes over and the other brother comes over. So Nadia today, most Muslims have come in 46, 47. The Hindu refugees are the ones which we've had these big refugee camps, Cooper's camp and a few others have all come. So there are about 22 to 25 lakh Hindus today now. They were all from Bangladesh. And after the Assam NRC experiment, so to speak, it's the Hindus in Bengal that have actually got absolutely scared. And even if you tell them that, look, there's going to be this sieve of the CAA by which all Hindus will automatically be given citizenship, they can see what's happening in Assam, where you're going to have to go to these detention centers, you're going to have to go through a process, go through a 6-year process to get this. And what people fear more, especially the poor, because the rich, nothing will happen to the rich. It's going to be like demonetization, where only the poor will suffer. And I don't think there's going to be any rich displaced person from anywhere who might have come from Bangladesh have to suffer, or from Pakistan have to suffer. It's the poor. And people don't like insecurity. So I think this is not, Shaheen Bagh is not only a Hindu phenomenon, a Muslim phenomenon. I don't think so. I think protests everywhere have got, this is something we see people from all communities coming out, simply because, at least in Bengal, we've seen Bengali Hindus get absolutely scared about this. And we've seen, even in the Lok Sabha, the solid middle-class Hindu vote which had gone to the current dispensation slowly shift away, because I think I always give this example. I said the way Hindus and Muslims live in India is that I, as a Hindu parent, may not want my child to marry a Muslim, but at the same time I don't want to kill my Muslim neighbor. There's a difference between the two. Right? So I think as long as those lines are okay, we're okay. But the minute those lines start getting blurred, then middle class Hindus wake up thinking, hold on, I didn't give you the license to do this. And I think that's what is happening to a large part of middle class India today.
Just to ask a very quick question before I come back to Siddharth. The government is very clear, they're not backing off the CAA despite the nationwide protests. Where do you see this headed?
We've heard this kind of rhetoric from the government before. When the NRC, for example, for the NRC, the Home Minister in Parliament stood up and said that we're going to do this everywhere. There's going to be an NRC in every state. 2 weeks after that, we had the Prime Minister say, who's talking about a nationwide NRC? We've never mentioned an NRC nationwide. And after the cabinet minister for Home in Parliament said that we're going to do an NRC in every state, we just had the Minister of State for Home, who's his junior, in Parliament stand up and say there is no current plan in reply to a star question in Parliament, say that there is no current plan to have a nationwide NRC. So I think that that they've come out and they've been very clear is actually not that clear. So, so I don't think that this is something that is set in stone. I think we've heard very mixed noises from the government. We've heard
on CAA
well, on NRCCA is still very much up in the air. I mean, you just passed the bill, you have to remember. And to pass a bill and to operationalize it are two different things. So yes, it's already set in law now, so there's no going back, but there are a lot of laws that are not. So I haven't heard anything on the CAA in Parliament since we passed that. So that's something, and you've got to remember the different noises we've heard on the NRC. So I don't know what they're thinking about, whether they will decide to go slow or what it is, but the fact is that it's an act. I'm one of the people that have challenged the act in the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has issued notice to the government, and that will come up, and we'll see what happens.
That's great. Government is from people who criticize, and parts of her speech are also, where she says things like that. You're not doing fair to the people who voted for you. She talked about how she was not in either the 31% or the 37%, but still the government is, so they're not answerable to her. The question is, how much of Modi's voters or Modi's supporters or Modi's electors have actually believed in this agenda, or how much of it was what she said in Parliament, that they wanted jobs and that's why they voted for you, and you are going back on that. What is your assessment as an independent journalist?
The truth is we don't really know, but if you look at the historically evolved BJP vote, reached its peak under Atal Bihari Vajpayee when he won roughly 21 to 22% of the electorate. Modi upped it to 31 in 2014. And it was widely assumed that the additional 10% that he brought to the BJP was the so-called aspirational voter who wanted jobs and so on and so forth. This 31% has now become 38% in 2019, despite the fact that he provided more jobs. Right? So either people are continuing to hold on to that mirage, or they are evaluating him in opposition to Rahul Gandhi, who's the other face. See, people vote for a variety of reasons, and I would say that we don't have enough evidence to, or we don't have enough we don't have enough, data to say whether Modi supporters are annoyed or happy about, say, a thing like the NRC or the CAA, but we can gauge from the dialing back of the NRC that Amit Shah and Modi are perhaps beginning to wonder whether they've bitten off more than they could chew. Right? If, as they suggest, and as they had intended, CAA was purely a game to polarize and to put pressure on Muslims and to disenfranchise perhaps eventually a section of Muslims. They know that word has spread that everybody will have to prove their citizenship, and poor people don't have the documentation to do that. The Assam example is before everybody. And despite all their attempts to somehow convince people that no Indian will be affected by this process, lots of people are deeply skeptical. And I'm sure many of them are Modi voters too, or have voted for Modi, or have illusions about him, or have faith in him. Right? So I think that we can read, and I think eventually even the CAA, I agree with you that the game is not over. Quite apart from the legal challenge, there's a lot more. I think that the protesters also have to read to. For example, one part that they have not adequately focused on is that the CAA, apart from being an assault on the idea of Indian citizenship, right, by introducing religion as a criterion, is also a highly dishonest refugee policy. India needs a refugee policy. And the CAA protesters often say that if there are Hindus who are forced to flee Pakistan, or if there are Sikhs who are forced to flee Afghanistan because of religious reasons, India should offer them safe haven. So India needs to have a humane refugee policy, but this is not that. Because recently there was a story about 26 families who were trying to cross the border and come from Pakistan to India. Well, bad news. The CAA will not help them. Right. So, what kind of a refugee policy is this? One of the ministers tweeted when there was a story about a Hindu girl being forced to convert to Islam in Sindh, saying that now where are the critics of the CAA? Well, the CAA does not help her. So, I think we need to make a noise about India needing a proper refugee policy. And a proper refugee policy cannot have a cutoff. And the BJP can never accept that because the minute they dilute this cutoff, the whole of Assam will be up in flames because the cutoff has been introduced to somehow make the CAA palatable in Assam. And that has not worked. Even the 2014 cutoff has not worked for the BJP. But if you remove the cutoff, the BJP knows it will have all hell to pay. So I think the campaign also has to focus on all of these different nuances. But I think that there's still plenty of fight left on this issue, and it will not be an easy thing for the BJP to be able to implement.
Go ahead.
One of the nuances about the NRC is if you look at the genesis of the NRC, the BJP is really caught in a catch-22 because the Assam Accord, the NRC came from the Assam Accord. Now, we lived in Assam with children, and in Assam the problem was not against the Assamese, they not pulled the Muslims out. You must understand, the Assamese had a problem more with Bengalis. So when Assam was, during partition, what had happened was that you had a very large part of Assam, which was Assam was a Hindu population state, but you had the province of Sylhet, which was a Muslim majority province, which was part of Assam. So Gopinath Borderoy, who was the chief minister at 46, said that there's a Sylhet referendum, we should have put it to referendum and let the people choose what you want to do. So most of Sylhet the Muslim part chose to remain in Bangladesh, but 3.5 thanas, 3.5 police stations, more around the Silchar Karimganj area, which was the Barak Valley, chose to come into Assam. So you had this large Bengali population, originally from Bangladesh, but who chose to be in India. So 47 when India and then East Pakistan was created, these people were already there. But over time, the Assamese indigenous population started feeling like Bengalis are taking away their jobs, Bengali language is taking away indigenous Assamese language, all of those issues. So when the Asudor Students' Union, I think it was, started during the late 70s, 80s, it became a very violent agitation. It was called the Bahari Khedao Rental, which basically translates to saying chase out the Bengalis. And Prafulla Mahanta and Rigu Pukan and Saigananda Sonowal and all these guys were all very, I would say, very violent student leaders for this agitating for this purpose. And when Rajiv Gandhi, after his mother died, became Prime Minister, he had Punjab on one side and Assam on the other, and he wanted peace at any cost. And I think at that point, signing the Assam Accord based on this was perhaps not the wisest thing to do. But the Assam Accord at that time was just to buy peace, and nobody thought that this would actually have to be operationalized at that point. And they said that, look, Bangladesh was created 24th March 71, anyone who's come after is going to be an illegal migrant, anyone who's come before. So you had set that date. Now, but obviously, when Sonowal and the others went to court, and as luck would have it, it came in front of the then Chief Justice of India, who was himself indigenous Assamese, whose father had also been chief, and who perhaps, I think in all fairness, should have recused himself from that bench, but didn't. And he took it upon himself to say that in 3 years we will operationalize this, we'll get the NRC going. So when they did this, they found that they had so many Bengalis. Now what happened in Assam was the Assamese were not happy with the NRC because all of a sudden it was like there are so many, we wanted more people to be thrown out, so they weren't happy. The rest of India and the BJP's core voter base of Hindus were not happy because they were like the 12 lakh Hindus. So in fact, some of the most violent and earlier CAA protests and the NRC protests were in Assam. I mean, 144 was in Guwahati for longer than anywhere else. So they basically got them into a situation where nobody's happy with this. And so
I would agree with you that it's a catch-22. Definitely for the BJP in Assam.
Absolutely.
Because they, and as you rightly said, they don't want Bengali-speaking people. They do all Muslims. So their opposition to the CAA is for fundamentally very different reasons than the rest of them.
Yeah.
I want to come back to you. I want to ask you very quickly, and then maybe if you have a take on that. There's a new animal. It's called the National Popular Register. Now we are told it's always been there, but now it's becoming, it's gaining currency. Now as much as you read, you get more confused. It says everybody's saying NPR is the new NRC. What is it? Is it going to be asking for birth certificates, my birth certificates, my parents' birth certificates? I mean, how is it going to play out? What is it?
So the government has not been very transparent about this, but let's explain from first principles. The National Population Register, NPR, is a product of rules which are kind of subsidiary rules to the Citizenship Act. The Citizenship Act itself does not talk about NPR. So there is a big question mark as to how rules can formulate a policy like the creation of an NPR, but the purpose of rules is to give effect to something that is stated in the parent law. So I think a robust challenge to the ultra-virus even of NPR, I don't think the NPR would survive, but let's say for a moment that NPR is being operationalized. In the earlier iterations, it was simply, one which focused on counting residents. Even now, the stated purpose is that. But NPR, in the way in which the rules envisage, NPR creates a basic database of every resident in India. While enumerating the residents, the enumerator is supposed to ask them for information from which you can gauge whether they are likely to be citizens or not. Some babu, some bureaucrat will then look at the NPR register, look at what supporting documentation the enumerator has been able to gather from each person, and then create two lists, one of citizens and one of doubtful citizens. Right? So, likely millions of people are going to find their name in the list of doubtful citizens, either because they weren't there when the enumerator came, or because they didn't show whatever documents they had, or maybe they didn't have them, or maybe they didn't have the full set. And chances are, this is where things actually happen on the ground, right? That the subjective assessment of the enumerator and the subjective assessment of the bureaucrat will determine who gets into which list on the basis of what kind of documentation. So I'm willing to wager that somebody with a very obviously Muslim name who has an incomplete set of documents will, with a much greater degree of probability, end up in the list of doubtful citizens.
So Aman Wadud, he's a lawyer from Assam.
Yeah.
He has pointed out after reading of the rules, the entire rules, that they will also allow private citizens to make complaints about another citizen.
Absolutely.
And then the onus will be on that person who's been named.
So that's in the NRC process, right? So the way it happens is that the NPR will be mined, right? So the data set will be mined by district level officials to create an NRC. Those who, and both lists, those who make it to the NRC and those who are doubtful citizens, then these names will be public. And any individual can challenge or vouch. Right? So let's say there's somebody you don't like who's made it to the NRC. You can go and file a complaint that this person is actually not Indian and set in motion a whole investigative process where the person will have to furnish all kinds of documents. And likewise, as the government says, if you are on the list of doubtful citizens and you don't have a complete set of papers, you could presumably find somebody local to say, he's Indian, and then that process of vouching may get you off the hook. But nowhere does the government actually explain in a transparent manner what they are trying to do. And this is the dishonesty of the whole thing.
I just want to ask you, the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, they have said more than once, and so have other functionaries in the government, that the NRC does not aim to target, or the CAA does not aim to target Muslims, Indian Muslims. They have sought to reassure Indian Muslims that they will not be targeted by the CAA. They are not in its scope. So, should we believe them? Well, it seems that people are not believing them on this.
The issue is not whether we can believe one or not. The issue is, for example, with the NPR, and the Bengal government was one of the first to stand up and say that we will not allow this to happen in Bengal. And like Sid pointed out, it is, if you look at the way the question is set up, when we had the census before this, and we got the NPR, there are two questions in the NPR, for example. One is, what is your father and mother's date of birth? And second, the place of birth. Now, for example, someone in my district, most of the Hindus in my district, I would say more than 50% of them, had one parent born in Bangladesh, because Nadia was part of the undivided Kushtiyar district, then divided into. So now, for example, if I am a person who's living in, and you ask me, my mother was born in 1948 in what is now Bangladesh, then that automatically puts me into, say, the doubtful list. and the doubtful list. Now then it is up. For example, we've seen in India, if you have a spelling error in a PAN card or a spelling error in an Aadhaar card, and if you are a PLU, a person like us, it's I would say frustrating enough and difficult enough for people like us who have access to resources, who have access to so many things, but it is so very difficult for people on the ground if there's one spelling error. And I've seen it now on the ground where people have got worried and you've got these huge lines outside the State Bank of India, outside Allahabad Bank, in almost every district headquarter in India today, where people before would not bother about if there was a spelling error in any document. Now they've got the fear of God in them. And the fact that they're scared something's going to happen. This fear is coming. So once this fear psychosis comes in, it doesn't matter what the Prime Minister is saying or what the Home Minister is saying. It really doesn't matter. It's fear which is driving people. And I think there's something that the Akalis, who are allies of the current BJP, said in Parliament. Prakash Singh Badal and Sukhbir Singh Badal said that. He says, anything that will make an Indian today have to stand in queue to prove that they are Indians is not something we can agree with. And I think fundamentally, that is the crux of the matter. Anything that makes us all stand in line to prove that we're Indian, we're sorry we can't be part of that.
I mean,
Can I just get this myth that Shah and Modi keep saying that no Indian would be affected, right? I can think of hundreds of scenarios where Indians will be. For example, let us say that there is a Bengali Hindu woman, Indian citizen, and who marries a Bangladeshi Hindu man, who the state regards as a migrant. Okay, that's one couple, right? And there is a Muslim Indian woman, let's say from West Bengal, who marries a Muslim Bangladeshi migrant. And both of these couples produce children. Right? Under the Citizenship Act, which defines the child is entitled to Indian citizenship only if at least one parent is Indian and the other parent is not an illegal migrant. Right? So two children born in India at the same time, the CAA process will render one of them effectively stateless. And okay, you can say, well, the child is not Indian by law, but what if it renders one Indian woman who is married to somebody as it disrupts her family life because she happens to be Muslim, and the other Indian woman who happens to be Hindu is unaffected. So there are lots of scenarios. So it's patently, and I'm not even going into the wider normative or philosophical issue. The affront that is perpetrated when you make religion a criterion and then you exclude some religions, right? And as a thought experiment, if you were to say that, let's say the IB or RAW were to tell the government that, hang on a minute, it's too dangerous to allow any Pakistani Christian or any Pakistani Hindu to come because some of them may have been made into agents or whatever. So let's have a language test. That apart from being one of these 5 religions, you have your mother tongue must be, and there's a list of languages, and it includes all the Indian languages, but it leaves out Odia. Won't Odia be up in arms? Say, what kind of a CA is this? Are we not Indian? Is our language not Indian? And for Shah and Modi not to grasp this.
So that I want to throw it open to people also, but just
Also, one more point
we have to.
Let's throw it open because
Yes.
people have lots of questions.
There's one,
Yes, sure. We'll
for
do that.
example, when they come in and say it doesn't, to go to sort of second his example, say for example, today if you are, let's say 2 illegal migrants, you're illegal, I'm illegal, you're Hindu, I'm Muslim. Now if you're both illegal migrants today, and in that we have come over before the cut-off date of 14 or whatever it is, under the CAA, if I'm Hindu, I only have to wait 6 years before I can apply. If you are Muslim, you have to wait at least 11 years before you can apply. Yes, that is what it is. Now, if I'm an illegal migrant and you're an illegal migrant, then we have both broken or are in violation of the same sections of the Passport Act and the Foreigners Act. But I get redress in less time than you do. So there's something fundamentally wrong with that, in so many ways.
I just want to, it's very clear to the Muslim community in India. This is something of a black and white issue for them. The last person they are telling us, we believe this law, CAA plus NRC, is only aimed at making us stateless and turning us into foreigners. I just want to ask both of you, do you think is that overblown on their part? Do you think they are overreacting? But that's what they are thinking.
was-
That's what they're saying. It's very clear.
You see, I fall back on Amit Shah's famous words, chronology samajhiye. Right? So CAA is not CAA by itself. If it was just the CAA, it's possible people may have said, "Chalo, this is not good, not great, but okay, we can live with it." But the CAA comes bundled with NRC, and it comes bundled with Mr. Shah's rhetoric about Deemak ko nikalna hai, or it comes bundled with 95 years of RSS philosophy, which says Muslims are not Indians, right? So it is natural for somebody to feel that they are being targeted. Even if you ask me as an analyst, it is not practical in the 21st century for any government or any bigoted person to think that you can drive 200 million people into the Bay of Bengal. You cannot lock up 200 million people. Bangladesh says there are our people who are going to take them. So what's the game plan? I think the game plan is possibly that through this process to disenfranchise either permanently or temporarily a good number of people who never vote for you, right? And it's not just Muslims, by the way. Like if Amit Shah's chronology is implemented eventually, then Adivasis don't have the adequate papers, and they also are not enthusiastic BJP voters. Dalits don't have papers in the same. So if you look at the caste and class analysis, look at the region. I was in Nagpur recently, and a couple of actors are telling me that in Maharashtra you have the nomadic community, which is quite sizable, and none of them have any documents of any kind, right? So they will not pass that NRC hurdle of yours, but they don't vote for BJP, so maybe put them in the doubtful citizen camp for 5 years. I mean, not camp, doubtful citizen category. Take away the right to work, right to vote, but they will carry on working because the political economy still, economically you still need them to do their labor and low wages and so on and so forth. But just take away the right to vote. Maybe that's the game plan.
That's exactly, I mean, I said this earlier also, I said there's no end game. What's the end game? Mr. Balu, the DMK stood up and said, and he said, what is the end game? When Bangladesh has said we're not going to take anyone back, and the problem is not with Pakistan, the problem is with Bangladesh. They keep bringing up Bangladesh all the time. And, what's the end game? Because Bangladesh has said we're not taking anyone back. And Mr. Modi's actually time and again said we're not sending anyone over. So if Bangladesh is not taking anyone back and you're not sending anyone over, what is the end game? There is no end game. I don't think they've really thought of an end game. It's just to create this to consolidate their vote bank. And one of the things that just strikes me about this government, we've had governments before this, but usually when I fight an election, I want to get as many people in the room to my side. And I think before this, we've always had governments that try and get as many people to vote for them. Now some of them might like you more, you may succeed, you may not succeed, that's something else. This is for the first time a government that does not care about a certain, they don't want everyone to vote for them, they just don't want it, they don't care. They're going to say we're 78% Hindu, we don't care what happens to the remaining 22%, we take our 78%, out of that, if we can get a sort of a staunch 50% of that, so that's 30-35%, we're good to go. And that's all they're doing. I mean, I was in Parliament last week and we had Sahib Singh Barma's son Parvesh who stood up and he says, Jai Shri Ram Bolo, he tells Varadarajan Roy, who's parliamentarian for my party, just across the aisle like that. He says, Jai Shri Ram Bolo, aap sabke paap dhul jayenge. Now I'm Hindu and I'm sitting there thinking, you're standing up at Parliament and saying that. I can imagine saying that in the street corner. But to say that in Parliament, as a Hindu, I found it offensive. The fact that chanting this would somehow cleanse us all. And I don't think previous to this that we had lived in a world where it would be not only okay but applauded and lauded. And I think that's what's happened. They don't care. They generally don't care.
Also, as Siddharth said, there is the ideology of Hindutva going back to Savarkar's treatise in 1923 and the founding of the RSS. I mean, for decades after decades, all they have said is Muslims and Christians and communists are foreigners. This is not their holy land. This is not their fatherland. That kind of rhetoric has been sort of amplified over the decades. Do you think that rhetoric needs to be challenged or not in India?
I mean, the very fact that we're all here today and we're living in India, I think is challenging enough.
Siddharth, would you like to have a last go on that?
This ideology and philosophy is deeply anti-people, anti-Indian. It has to be opposed, and people are opposing and fighting it.
Okay, thank you. So let me ask for questions. Very short, as Parveen said at the beginning. Very short questions with a question mark at the end. Yes, please go ahead.
I just have a question.
Can you stand up, please,
Yes.
and speak a little louder?
So I'm a little confused about the about who is an Indian from documents standpoint. As in, we have heard a lot that most people don't have birth certificates. What else is it that they have which makes them an Indian? I have my passport, which is like recognized all over the world. It was made through due process, but now they're saying they won't accept that passport as a sign of my citizenship. What should somebody like me do? For example, if I didn't have a birth certificate, what would the rest of the country do?
Yeah. Thank you.
No, the truth is that, and we've asked this question to the government, they don't have an answer. They're saying we will say it in due course when the NRC, if NRC is ever implemented. And and they have given false information out through whenever you see a story which says MHA officials say, and it doesn't name who this official is, you should switch on your bullshit meter and say that this is they're just making this stuff up. Last week somebody some MHA official planted a story because the question was, okay, you have the CAA, how will you know who is a Hindu? Right? Because the fact is that there is no government document, which so nothing prevents Mutuzur Rahman from saying Obi Hindu, right? It's true. And how do you prove that he's not a Hindu? And so this so-called unnamed official said, no, we will look at the Aadhaar card. No, Aadhaar card doesn't have religion. Right? And he didn't go to the report and tell him, I know the minister, there's no religion on the Aadhaar. So they don't know. And I think you have a point, the Mahua, when she said, the game is really to polarize. So that if you're not really serious about this, and the reason you aren't is because there's so many practical difficulties in doing it. But if you just create division, create polarization, create insecurity and fear in the minds of Muslims, so that they will just and other people who feel they may be disenfranchised or their rights may be assailed in some way, then maybe that's the goal. Because there is no, Mr. Shah keeps saying, ऐसा कोई country है जहाँ पे एक national register of citizens नहीं है. Well, US doesn't have an NRC. There's a fight going on here as to whether the census should count just residents as it does, or can begin to at least count citizens, because the US government doesn't know how many US citizens live in the US, and I don't think the US is any the poorer for that. Quite frankly,
Also in the US, the law is very clear. Regardless of your parents' status, if you're born in the US, you are a US citizen. That's also not something. Okay, let's get the next question right at the back there. Yes. Please speak a little louder.
Yeah, really. Just have a question on the basic fundamentals of this law and how it affects Hindus specifically. So there are two situations. One is a Hindu who has come from Pakistan or Bangladesh, living as a refugee, and he would be given Indian citizenship as per the CA. However, if there is a Hindu in India who has not come from Pakistan or Bangladesh and he has no papers, as per the law, will he be put in a detention center, or just because he's a Hindu, he'll be forgiven?
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question. Okay, the first is when you're talking about the law is easy on both counts. So the first is when you say that you're a Hindu and you've come in. So when we passed the CAA now, but you have to remember it came in 2012, right? Before this, when was it? When it was first it was brought in, it was passed in the Lok Sabha, didn't have the numbers in the Rajya Sabha. Was it 15 or 12?
2014.
2014 is when they brought it in. So when they went in, it went to a joint select committee. And there's a 438-page report of the Joint Select Committee, which I've read. And in that report, the director of the IB was made to depose as a witness. And it's in the report, and it said since India became independent, in the last 70 years, only 33,000 odd people have come in. Hindus have come in and said that they're refugees. At the time of entry, did they say that they had put persecution as a reason? Right. So even according to Indian government, there are only 33,000 Hindus who have come in from any other country claiming religious persecution. You must understand that.
The law also doesn't have persecution.
It doesn't have persecution, but when you say that you are fleeing and you are Hindus, then that's the reason that they're given for putting in this law in the first place. Right? Which is why people are saying that you could have, what about Ahmadiyas, what about Rohingyas, what about everybody else, number one. So you've got to say at the time of coming in. And another thing is, if your father came in before 71 and he claimed he was persecuted and he is now dead, how are you going to prove that somebody was persecuted? So how do you claim it? There's nothing, it's completely shades of grey. So there's no way to know. When you read that committee report, it's very clear. The second thing, when you ask that you could be a poor person, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, anybody, which is what's happened in Assam. And if you don't have papers, you're Hindu. Out of that, there were 12 lakh people out of the 19 lakh in the final NRC list, which is exactly in Group B, like you said, where they didn't have papers. And yes, if you don't have papers, then you go to a detention center according to what the law is. So, yes, you don't know. So, this CAA will give you an automatic A, how do you prove that you're Hindu? B, if you don't have papers, you don't have papers. And if there's a law for people without papers, then how is it different if you're Hindu than if you're anybody else? So, I think they really walked into a complete swamp.
I mean, there is this joke going on Facebook where people are saying, अब ये किसको पाकिस्तान भेजेंगे, हिंदू को भेजेंगे, वो फिर चलाएगा सीधे.
But the bottom line is that this law is just for 3 countries and for these 5 religions. So, say a Hindu Rohingya from Myanmar, and there are Hindu Rohingyas, would not be eligible. And similarly, Hindus who come post 2014 would not be eligible. And I think one has not hammered away enough at this, that what India needs actually is a proper refugee policy. And incidentally, if there's only 33,000 Hindus who have stated that they were persecuted, what's equally interesting is that actually no Ahmadi has come from Pakistan either pre-2014, right? So you wonder if no Ahmadi has come, what is the big deal in saying or Ahmadis? Because it's not as if you're going to be able to give citizenship to everybody, right? But if the purpose is to just create these kind of exclusionary categories and send a wider signal as to who is Indian and who is not. You know, we had a piece by Bimola Koijam, who's a Manipuri scholar, where he reminded us of this speech that Mr. Modi made on, I think when he went to Wembley, when he said कि हम passport नहीं देखते, passport का रंग मत देखो, हम लोगों का खून का रंग देखते हैं. Of course, everybody's खून is red in color, but what he meant was that Indian खून है, so then we regard you as Indians. And so to go from that and then to say I'm going to create, refugee status and citizenship for just these 5 religions is as close as anybody is coming to saying that Muslim Khoon somehow is not Indian in the way that Hindu Khoon or the Buddhist or other Khoon and Christians have been forced to include. We can have a whole debate on that as a very clever tactic. Although I feel in America you should make a noise about the fact that why are Jewish Pakistanis? Like why have Jews been excluded from this list of 5 religions? I mean, it's not as if they are or Baha'is.
Okay, yes.
And also the reason that they keep giving, which is important for people to remember, I think a few pieces of this is, sometimes when they keep saying that the Hindu population in Bangladesh was X% at that time, and now it's Y%, right? And I'm not making any moral judgment or anything, I'm not even going into the merits of this argument about why they were and why they've come down. But for example, if you just take the Anglo-Indian population in Calcutta or in India 25 years ago, and if it was X, and today it's maybe 1,000th of that, simply because when a lot of them migrated to Australia, it's not that anybody was out to get the Anglo-Indians in Calcutta or to get the Anglo-Indians in India. It's just when family emigrated to Australia or to Canada in search for better life, people just went there. That doesn't always prove that they were religiously persecuted. Yeah, I mean, Calcutta was home to a large Jewish population. We had Nahum's bakeries, we had everything, and over time they've all gone away to Israel. Most of them, there are probably 6 or 7 families left today. It doesn't mean that the Bengalis were out with a machete to sort of get at every Jew that was living in Calcutta. It doesn't always mean that. So there are lots of reasons why populations in neighboring countries, especially when you've got a very large Hindu country in the middle, you've got smaller countries there, that people automatically come in sometimes. It doesn't always mean that they're religious persecution, and then to use that to exclude people who may genuinely be persecuted. For example, Hindu Tamils in Sri Lanka or anything else, as some people have pointed out, is again wrong, and which should be covered by a more all-encompassing refugee policy rather than this kind of polarizing garbage, frankly.
Yes, quick, because we have a lot of questions.
Just a very small question, especially for you. Being an NRI, what role we can play from here? And so being an NRI, what role we can play from here? What is the best thing we can do? And second thing, if any NRI, I myself would want to go back to India and work there either ways, if it is political, if it is activism, if it is anything. So what is your suggestion on that?
No, I'm going to be a little, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but I've lived here a long time, I've lived in the UK a long time. Unfortunately, I have found that a lot of Indians living abroad, especially people who came here in the 60s and 70s, tend to be, unfortunately, bound in by very narrow ideas of what India is and what India should be.
Exactly.
And I think the best thing you can do today is to try and get out of the trap. To stop thinking your father or mother might have been affected by partition, but to say sab sare Musliman aise hi hote hain, you don't know when my father was in Lahore in 1946 and there were all these Muslims who surrounded us and were burning our houses, and that's a very good reason why we should go all after them now. It's no different from the BJP's rhetoric of saying Alauddin Khilji did this and hence I must kill my Muslim neighbor today. It's no different. So I think this is something I have seen among our communities very strongly, having lived in these communities in the UK and in the US, and if people in this room say that doesn't happen, I think you're not accepting the truth. And I think it's high time that Indians living abroad woke up to the fact that in order to save the ethos of our country, we must also stop thinking that way. That's the most important thing.
Okay, good.
Yes.
My question is about, I think, Ms. Moitra, you talked about the superficial nationalism, right? And we're struggling with it. I come from Bihar. And what is feeding superficial nationalism? There's one thing which is, of course, the leaders' rhetoric. The other thing is media, which is, of course, the goody media we're talking about. But it's not like this is happening over the past 5 years or 6 years. But what else is feeding superficial nationalism understanding? And what is the solution, short term and long term?
Okay.
I mean, it's a very loaded question, but I think
Let's just take 2 more questions because after that we have to finish. There's a lady at the back, right at the back. Yes, you, ma'am.
Can I answer that too?
No, let's just take it together because 7:15 is when we won't get out.
But yeah, but let me answer that.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
My question is.
No, wait, she wants to answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, superficial nationalism, I think, is fed by. It's just an easy thing to do. It's just an easy thing to do. It's just, again, the easiest trick in the book to polarize people is to say, you do this, then you're a good Hindu or a good Indian, and if you do that, then you're a bad Indian. And I think everything, the troll army, the media, everything that this dispensation is putting out feeds into that. And in order to, we must have, it's very easy when you stand up and everyone says, and if you go against the flow, then people attack you and say, oh, you're not a good Indian, or you're not a good Hindu. And I think the only solution in the long term is to have the courage to say, you know what? I am a good Hindu, and I still think you're talking rubbish. And I'm a proud Indian, and that doesn't mean I need to agree with this government. That's all that you have to do.
Just, excuse me, we just have 2 more
Unfortunately, when you
questions.
stand up against something like this anywhere, it's not conciliation, it has to be confrontation. I'm sorry.
Yes, lady at the back, please, you were asking a question.
Let's make that Siddharth.
Just a couple of things.
Oh, if you have a question, just
Yeah,
because
it's
we are looking at the clock right now.
So I am just like every self-obsessed American, just worried about my OCI status. I happen to be a Muslim American with an overseas citizenship in India. Is there a possibility of me being a Muslim and losing, not just me, but other Muslim overseas citizens of India, this movement translating and crossing the borders and coming here? Because there was an incident about one of the somebody losing, who happened to be Muslim,
Atif
lost
Tafsir.
his citizenship. So is there any movement in Parliament or any talks like that? Because later on,
Thank you. We'll just have
I would say no, that there isn't. And the one case, Atish Tafsir, the reason I say no is that often people psych themselves into wondering that they're going to be targeted and that they hold back from doing various things. So you should not feel intimidated or pressured by this because it's not going to happen. There's no talk of it. And the one example of Atish Tafsir, essentially they got him using a kind of loophole in the OCI, legal language, which disallows people who have one Pakistani parent from getting OCI status. And he contests the claim that he hid his parentage. His father is Pakistani, but it's an estranged family, right? So his parents are never married legally, and so it seems that this is open to legal challenge. But the government was able to latch on to that, and the reason they did it also is because he was critical of them. So I don't think that this can be generalized, or that there is a generalized fear that Muslim OCI holders are somehow going to lose that.
Let's have the last question. I'm sorry, we really don't have the time. Oh, somebody already has the microphone. Can you stand up, sir, please? Can you just stand up, please? Thank you.
I'll be there, so that's why I'm just
You
giving
mentioned
it. So.
Savarkar.
Mike, can you use the
You
microphone?
mentioned Savarkar, so you went back quite a bit. And so I'm asking a question. After 1948, with the murder or assassination of Mahatma Gandhi, RSS was banned. Hindu Mahasabha, RSS, whatever you want to call it, was banned. And that was under Sardar Patel. Today, many people who revere Sardar Patel are with the RSS.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah.
We are looking at the time now.
So when you have at one time RSS being banned, and today the same RSS is in power and doing all the damage that it possibly could, what is the role of the parliament? What's the role of the media? What's the role of anybody else to make sure that that thing is not, repeated?
Thank you.
Should I take a stab at that? So I think, look, it's the fact is that people, based on their political, prejudices or interests, make up any history they want. So Sardar Patel's role is exactly as you have outlined. But because it suits the BJP's partisanship today to uphold or to find icons who are not connected to Jawaharlal Nehru, so then Sardar Patel is presented in a certain light. But everything you say is true. And I think that it's important to point these things out. But I think the battles, quite frankly, I think history battles yield only so much benefit. And it's futile to point out, as we always do, nevertheless, that Sardar Patel banned the RSS and so on and so forth. But essentially, whatever fight you're fighting has to be fought in terms of the present day realities. Because the person who supports RSS today will either not believe you when you say Patel banned RSS, or will have some very easy counter argument, because the same Patel who banned the RSS after 1 year lifted the ban. So where does that leave it, right? So I think we have to construct arguments based on the present. Quite frankly.
Would you like to have on this?
Well, I take my question. I think he's answered that well.
Okay. Let's go ahead.
So I would actually go back to the OCI thing that you mentioned. One of the things in CA which most people have ignored is that the government has introduced another disqualification on the grounds on which OCI card could be cancelled. So there were some grounds already under section 7D, I think, I am forgetting the exact section. Now they have said that if you violate any of the laws in India which the government specifies, and the government is yet to specify, your OCI card could be cancelled. So I'm not sure if it is correct for us to presume that the government is not thinking about this, because this comes just a couple of months after the Atish incident, and a lot will depend on the kind of laws that are specified.
All I'm saying is that I find it hard to imagine that there would be some kind of religion criterion there. I mean, her question was about Muslim OCI holders, but it's quite likely, it's quite possible that this may be used to curb dissent or whatever, or to do various things. But I don't think one needs to worry at this stage about any kind of religion-based criteria.
Do you have time to take more questions? Okay, great. Yes, you already asked a question. Yes, sir. Right.
Yeah,
Sorry for just.
Yeah, so it's been crazy going on this. So the positive is the Delhi victory there. I'm just wondering if the kind of clean politics which Mr. Kejriwal and his party has run, can that be a template for others to follow elsewhere in the country? Can that work for the opposition of today to work on the ground more and make India more positive?
Can I add on to the question? There have been allegations of Kejriwal pandering to the soft Hindutva narrative, and
Well, I'll take that question. I think it's very difficult to draw, to take sort of one data set and to extrapolate and have a pan-India. We've seen that fail over and over and over again. I mean, Kejriwal, this is his third election, and yet Aam Aadmi Party, they thought they'd take over Punjab. They lost so badly in Punjab. They only got 1 MP there. In the assembly election, they lost everything. So I think the Kejriwal model for whatever it was touted was going to be a model that was going to take over India. And Aam Aadmi Party in Calcutta was setting up candidates. And we've seen 5 or 7 years since that hasn't happened. But yet it hasn't stopped them from coming back with a fantastic victory after you would think some kind of anti-incumbency or in the face of such a negative vitriolic campaign run by the BJP, so much money being spent, all of those things. So I think it's very difficult to extrapolate. For example, my party, we've come back with stronger mandate every time in the goal, but at the same time, it's not like, we have got pan-India presence. So I think these are things that are very difficult to extrapolate from. And yes, what is important, I think what is important to remember is that one model seems to be working. And that model is wherever regional parties are strong, if that regional party is taking on the current government on 1:1, then I think on the state level that seems to be working. And in states where there are no regional parties, for example, in Rajasthan or in MP, where the Congress has been coming back, is where they'll be working. But in states, if the Congress and, for example, 3 regional parties are coming in, then the BJP is coming forward. So I think the lesson out of all of this is if there's a 1:1 fight and votes are not getting split, I think on a state-by-state basis, but that again didn't translate into a pan-India basis. So it's really been very, very difficult to extrapolate from state elections and to take it to the pan-India level.
If I can answer the second question. I'll just answer the question on Kejriwal and soft Hindutva. I think we have to guard against snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Okay? What was the Delhi result all about? That a party deployed the Prime Minister and the Home Minister in election rallies. They sent dozens of their MPs to campaign. 300 MPs sent to campaign, and the single point agenda of these ministers and MPs to campaign was to polarize Delhi on religious grounds, religious lines. And the party which did that ended up coming second, and the party that they were trying to paint as terrorist, as communal, as what alarmed me was that the instinctive reaction of BJP analysts after the results came was that this is a victory for Hindutva because Kejriwal recited Hanuman Chalisa. The fact is that Hinduism is not the same as Hindutva. If somebody is a Hindu, like you said, you are a Hindu here, but here's an example of a Hindu who says that I will not allow Hindutva guys to abuse my religion, right? So is this Hinduism versus Hindutva, or is it soft Hindutva? So I think and Hindutva, let's be very clear, has nothing to do with the religion, right? It's the use of religion for dividing people and spreading hate. That is what Hindutva is. Whether it's soft or hard, that is a single point purpose. It has no other meaning.
And even the soft Hindutva term is something that has been coined, I think, by the troll army of the right. Because I tell you, I have a constituency, in fact, Karimpur, where I was an MLA from, was very high Muslim percentage. I was a Hindu. I've never played the communal card. But when you're campaigning, for example, I don't go into a mosque, I don't go into a temple. I don't do any of these things. So I think it violates the code of conduct, we don't do it. There are many, I was fighting the Lok Sabha, the BJP candidate against me, and he must have gone to 500 temples in my constituency, temples that didn't know existed. And people were coming to me in my own team and saying, Didi, he's going to every temple. Today is Thursday. Can you just go and put your head in there? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. But if I had done it, and there's nothing wrong with if I had done it, because I do my puja at home every day. On Thursday, I do Lakshmi Puja. If he knows the Hanuman Chalisa in Bengali, we have what is called the Lokhi Pachari, which I read every Thursday, which I know and in speeches I've said that also. But by saying that doesn't mean that I'm pandering to the Hindutva thing. That is being a Hindu in the way that I know to be a Hindu. But it's almost as if Kejriwal, by doing something normal at home, but if he reads the Hanuman Chalisa or believes in Hanuman, the minute he says it, it's almost like, aha, so he's actually a Hindu. Do you know what I'm saying? And the fact that people are talking about it like this, I think is victory for the BJP troll army.
Yeah, in an ideal society, he should not even ask that question. And if he was asked, he would have said, I'm sorry, who are you to ask me? Right? In an ideal society. But he knew that this is the kind of India we are in. If he says, either he says, मेरे को पता नहीं है, or he says कि मैं नहीं बोलूँगा, that 10-second clip will be played everywhere on all your WhatsApps and so on. So I think he had a canny sense of. I'm not saying. I think there are other problems of Kejriwal, which I'm happy to discuss after this thing is over. And there's a whole debate, But on this, I'm very wary of this soft Hindutva kind of argumentation which is happening. Although, as you're right, I mean, we've run pieces at the wire and we've run counter pieces to that.
All right. Any more questions? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is.
Can you stand up, please?
Yeah, this is adding on to the question that we said, right? The BJP's game plan is to get at least the 50% of 78%.
Yeah.
And that's why they can win. And that is why they're also willing in the states where UP and West Bengal, the 65% can divide it. What is the commitment of political opposition parties of India to stay united? I think the polarization of the voters can actually be countered by polarization of the parties. If you don't give too many options, maybe they will not get most of the 65% voters. I think that is where we are missing. I think.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I also said. I said I think that model is rapidly becoming clearer. So, for example, in Bengal, if the Trinamool, even with we had a four-way fight in the Lok Sabha, and if you see the vote shares, the Congress, the BJP and the Trinamool are pretty much 1:1. So, in states like that, it's rapidly becoming even people who were traditionally Congress voters. What's happened in Delhi now? People who were Congress voters either have gone to the BJP or they've gone to the AAP because they've realized that they don't want to waste their vote. So in the communist voters in Bengal, for example, they came to us now, a lot of them have gone to the BJP. So the same thing's happening everywhere. I think that's a natural divide that is coming, not because of anything that political parties are doing, but what the voters themselves are doing. Because that's something they are realizing. If voters like the BJP, even if they voted Congress in the past, if they decide that the BJP is for them because they hate the Trinamool, they're voting for the BJP. Otherwise, if it's a Congress voter who's like, you know what, we don't like Mamta, but BJP is even worse, and they're going towards Mamta. So that's something the voters are automatically doing on a state-by-state basis, where if the regional party is strong, they're going with the regional party. If there's no regional party, they're going with the Congress or whatever the national party is. That's something that's happening on the ground without much work that you're having to do.
Yes, ma'am.
This is more of a global question. You both spoke pretty extensively about the treatment of migrants.
Did someone else especially reading out, or do you want to just look at us and answer?
Actually, you find.
I read both my questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So around the world, we're seeing total disregard for refugees. It's happening in America here with the treatment of undocumented immigrants, many of whom are environmental refugees, and in Turkey with the treatment of Syrian refugees. So disregard is attributed, in my opinion, to the rise of fascism throughout the world. So my question is, will the narrative around refugees ever change, and is that even possible with regimes like Trump, Modi, Johnson, Bolsonaro?
I mean,
That's you're a wise man.
it's about. I mean, you're right. I mean, there is a universality to the politics of all of these people, and xenophobia is very easy to turn into a political platform. I would just bring us back to the India focus. I think what makes the Indian case a little bit different and unique is that unlike Bolsonaro or unlike Trump or Boris Johnson or anybody else, you have a 100-year organization called the RSS, right, which has nurtured this philosophy of sectarianism and communal division, and today enjoys state power, right? So you have state power, and you have a 100-year-old history, and even if the one individual who personifies that power, which is Modi, were to go tomorrow, the RSS remains and the RSS has strengthened. Bolsonaro, when he loses, and I'm sure he will very soon, will not have left any such organization behind, and is not the product of. He's a product of other historical, and socio-cultural factors of Brazilian society. But things are quite. So I think that comparisons are useful, but each country's own individual trajectory has to be understood in order for it to be effectively, countered.
Thank you so much. Excuse me, sir. She has to leave, so we are ending it right
This
here.
is very disappointing. We are living in a world where there's a lot of fascism
Mother Sahib,
from Soviet
Mother
Union.
Sahib, he is moderating, and she has to leave.
She has to
So
leave.
after she leaves, you can talk.
On a very low
Yeah,
level,
yeah, please.
Yes.
but not the main thing.
Thank you,
We
sir.
are taking
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
After she leaves, you can talk. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Please stay seated. Please, come on.